ceremonies for a sung mass, a high mass with incense. And before starting that, we'll just start with a few of the preliminaries, a few of since the sung mass is a little more involved than the low mass. So there are some extra things that the servers will have to know how to do. So we can begin then with carrying an acolyte candle. The server carries an acolyte candle. The acolytes walk side by side. So if I have an acolyte to my left, I'll hold the candle with my outside arm under the node, and the inside arm will be placed, the hand will be placed under the base of the candle. The candle is held directly in the middle. Okay? The candle is held in the middle because it represents Christ. Okay? The wick of the candle can represent the soul of Christ. The wax, the body of our Lord, and the flame represents the divinity of Christ. Okay? So the server holds the candle directly in front of him. It's important to hold the candle straight, not to tilt the candle. Okay? Because if you tilt the candle, you can spill wax from the candle on the carpet. And the servers, the two acolytes, should hold the candles at exactly the same level. Okay, so they can test this before Mass. You hold the base at the level of your belt. Normally the acolytes are of the same height. So if they're holding the base of the candle at the level of their belt, then it's usually, then the candles will be even. But the server shouldn't be looking at the other candle and looking around during the ceremony to make sure they're holding the candle straight. If they just look at the bases of the candle, that should be sufficient to ensure that they're holding the candle straight. And since the outside hand is the one that's placed under the node, if I have another server with me here on this side, if we turn around, I have to switch hands, because then my other arm will be the outside arm. And with the processional cross, the server will carry the processional cross with the right hand over the left. And it's important to make sure that the image on the cross is facing straight. Okay? The image should be straight and not turned to one side or the other. And again, as the acolyte candle, the processional cross should be held straight and not tilted at an angle in either direction or from side to side. Then with regard to the processional torch, the torchbearers carry a processional torch. As the acolytes do, they carry the candle. The torchbearers carry the torch in the outside hand. Okay, the other hand is placed flat on the chest with the fingers together. The torch should be carried at about eye level. Okay, because again, the torchbearers are usually of the same height. So if they carry the torch at eye level, then the torches will be at the same level. Okay, and just as carrying an acolyte candle, if the torchbearers turn around, they have to switch hands because the torch is carried in the outside hand. The torch is not carried in the center as the acolyte candle, but it's carried off to one side. When genuflecting or kneeling down with the torchbearer should place the torch on the ground first so that he doesn't bang the torch when he's genuflecting or rattle it or tilt it from side to side. The torch should be carried straight. So again, not leaning to one side or the other. Okay? Although this swings back and forth, it's not meant to be held so that the candle is outside the frame which holds it. And with regard to the use of the thurible, this is the thurible. After the incense has been blessed, the thurible is carried in the right hand. Okay, before the incense is blessed, the thurible is carried in the right hand. Before the incense is blessed, the thurible is carried in the left hand, the boat in the right. Once incense is blessed, the thurible is carried in the right hand for the rest of Mass, and always held in the right hand for the rest of Mass, until it's time to impose incense. At that time, the thurible will take the thurible in the left hand, lift the ring, raise the lid by use of the control chain, and then he'll grab the chains near the lid of the thurible and hold it up so that the priest can conveniently put in the incense. The thurifer leaves the thurible at this level until after the priest has blessed it. Okay? When the priest blesses the incense, then the thurifer can close the thurible, and lower the ring again. With regard to the boat, it's to be noted that when the thurifer puts the spoon in the boat, the spoon should be placed in the boat upside down. Because if it's in right side up, and if there's a scoop of incense in it, then it can spill incense on the floor when the father removes the spoon from the boat. So the spoon should always be upside down, lid closed. When the thurifer is carrying the boat, he should try to hold it in front of his chest, and the thurible to the side. When handing the boat to someone, if it's convenient for him, he should try to hand it with the lid open. Okay? If it's too complicated, that's not important, and it can be dispensed with very easily. We'll begin then with the asparagus ceremony, and then carry on through the rubrics of a missa cantata. Okay, just a note then before we begin concerning the sacristan and the master of ceremonies. Now, the sacristan is responsible for making sure that the sacristy is in order, making sure that the sanctuary is prepared for the ceremonies. So therefore, it's important for servers, before they serve the Mass, that they are courteous to the sacristan, and that they don't move things around in the sacristy, because he has them in a place so that he knows where they are. And so if the sacristan asks them to do something, then they should be cooperative. Now, with regard to the master of ceremonies, the master of ceremonies is meant to know all of the rubrics and what each person and in each position is supposed to do. So therefore, during the ceremony, the master of ceremonies directs the other servers. And so he's supposed to be obeyed by the other servers. Okay? During the ceremony, if the master of ceremonies gives you a signal, then you should follow it. In fact, Pope St. Pius X used to say that if the master of ceremonies makes a mistake during the ceremony, you should follow that mistake. Okay? If he tells you to do something that's incorrect, you should do it because he told you to do it. Because the master of ceremonies might know something that you don't know. Okay? There might be a complication. Something might have gone wrong somewhere. So he might have to modify things a little bit in order to make sure that the proper duties are carried out during the Mass. So, now the Master of Ceremonies, we said the Master of Ceremonies is meant to be obeyed. Okay, now this doesn't mean that the Master of Ceremonies should walk around with an authoritative air all the time and be constantly giving orders. Okay? The Master of Ceremonies, if he's meant to be obeyed, that means he has a responsibility to know the rubrics. Okay, but that doesn't mean that he has the right to be unkind to the other servers. Okay? He's meant to be obeyed, but he's also meant to be an example. Okay? Since he's the Master of Ceremonies, he's usually been serving for a greater number of years than the other servers, and he's usually one of the older servers, so he should take that responsibility upon himself to set a good example for the servers. And then once again, the servers should be cooperative with the Master of Ceremonies, both before, before, and after the ceremony. So that because the Master of Ceremonies is responsible for checking the things to make sure everything's ready for the ceremony. And so if he asks you to put something out there, then the server should be cooperative with him. Okay? And don't think he's just trying to give you extra work to do. Okay, so now we'll begin with the ceremonies for the sung Mass. Procession will begin at the main entrance to the church, and the order of procession will be the thurifer, the crossbearer with the acolytes on either side, torchbearers, the Master of Ceremonies, and then the priest who's offering the Mass. When there's an asparagus, which may only take place before the principal Mass on Sundays, the thurifer will carry his aspergillium and the stew into the takes his place in the procession behind the acolytes if there are no torch bearers, or behind the last row of torch bearers, and directly in front of the celebrant. Upon entering the sanctuary, the acolytes, when they're with the cross-bearer, do not genuflect. They would bow. The acolytes to the epistle side. When the acolytes go to the epistle side, they put their candles on the credence table in the two back corners. Torchbearers, after genuflecting, bow to each other and then go to their places. The MC will come up to the right. The celebrant will come with them in the center. The master of ceremonies will clap for a genuflection. Before the genuflect. Then he'll give a double clap. The celebrant and all the servers will kneel. The MC and the third will remain standing while the third hands the aspergillium to the master of ceremonies. Then they will both kneel. Master of ceremonies will give the aspergillium to the priest with the normal ceremonial kisses. Kissing first the aspergillium, then the priest's hand. The priest begins by sprinkling the altar. He'll sign himself. The celebrant will stand, but all the other servers remain kneeling. First sprinkle the master of ceremonies, then the third. At that point, the master of ceremonies will clap, and all the servers will rise. Father will normally then sprinkle the other servers, at which point they bow and make the sign of the cross. Then, after that, the master of ceremonies will clap, and these three will genuflect. The MC and the third switch places in front of Father. May take his coat. Okay. Now, the idea when holding a coat is not to make a wing of the coat, okay, but simply to hold the coat off the celebrant's arm. So they should hold the coat so that the outside part of the coat is turned in, so that you can't see the lining very much. They'll walk down the main aisle with Father. Father will sprinkle the faithful as he goes along. And when they reach the back of the church, they'll turn, they'll bow, they'll wait to the back, and bow for the Gloria Patri. After they bow, the Master of Ceremonies and the thurifer will switch places in front of Father again. Master of Ceremonies will clap, and will genuflect. And Father will sprinkle the people on the other side of the church. When they come back into the sanctuary, he'll give the aspergillium to the Master of Ceremonies, who takes it with the usual kisses. He'll hand the aspergillium to an acolyte. The acolyte will hand the Master of Ceremonies the card with the prayers after the asparagus. The thurifer and the MC will hold the card in front of the celebrant with the outside hand, like this, facing toward each other. The celebrant standing in the middle. They hold the card like this. After the celebrant has finished the prayers, the Master of Ceremonies will take the card and hand it back to an acolyte. The thurifer, the Master of Ceremonies. Now, do you normally have the celebrant go to the cedilla to take out the card? All three of them will genuflect. The thurifer will go to the sacristy to get the thurible. The Master of Ceremonies will accompany the celebrant to the cedilla. They'll take who normally takes the thurifer? Well, then in that case, the thurifer will have to come over. Okay, the thurifer, then in that case, he'll have to come over to the cedilla with the celebrant. Master of Ceremonies will take the coat and give it to the thurifer. Master of Ceremonies will assist the priest in vesting. He'll give the maniple to the priest, kissing the side of the maniple, and then he'll give it to the priest. And then he'll assist the priest with the chasuble. The priest has the chasuble. The priest has the chasuble. He'll return to the altar with the Master of Ceremonies. Upon a signal from the Master of Ceremonies, which will be a single clap, all the servers kneel down, including the Master of Ceremonies. Father will genuflect. So everyone will kneel down. Father genuflects. They begin the prayers at the foot of the altar. After the prayers at the foot of the altar, the celebrant will ascend the step, the Master of Ceremonies will clap, and everyone rises. The thurifer approaches, and incense is imposed. incense. Turn the spoon to the MC. The spoon is handed again with the ceremonial kisses. When the celebrant starts to put the incense on, the master of ceremonies asks the blessing of the priest by saying, Benedicite pater reverente, or Benedicite pater reverendissime for the bishop. After he puts on the incense, he'll return the spoon to the MC. The thurifer holds the thurible up until the celebrant blesses it, and then he closes the thurible. Give the thurible to the MC and take the vote. Now, do you normally have to hold this during the institution? Okay. So the thurifer and the MC, the MC will handle the thurible with the ceremonial kisses. The two of them will walk with Father as he incenses the altar. Acolyte 1 will remove the missal from the altar. He doesn't bow before and after. It's just as at low mass. There's no bows. So when Father genuflects and he's holding something, those who are genuflecting with him, the MC and the third, will simply put their hand under Father's elbow. Okay? Just lightly support Father under his elbow. Now, Father, when the priest genuflects, Father will put his hand on the altar, but it is never permitted for anyone who is not a priest to touch the altar, to lay his hands flat on the altar. Okay? Now, if the servant has to wipe some dust off the altar, or if he's smoothing the cloth out on the altar, then naturally he'd have to put his hands on the altar. But during the ceremony, the servant can never place his hands on the altar. Only Father can place his hands on the altar. We go through the incensation of the altar, beginning with the crucifix. And each time Father genuflects, the servant will support him under his elbow. He'll incense the reliquaries on the gospel side, the reliquaries on the epistle side. And then after he incenses the reliquaries on the epistle side, he'll proceed along incensing the altar on the epistle side. We'll do the gospel side in like manner. Finished incensing the altar, he'll return the thurible to the master of ceremonies, who takes it once again with the normal kisses. The master of ceremonies and the thurifer bow to the celebrant, and they incense the celebrant with 3 double swings. Master of ceremonies will return the thurible to the thurifer. The thurifer will return to his place. Now, after the celebrant had finished incensing the epistle side, he began incensing the gospel side, the acolyte returned the book to the altar. And the book is open at the beginning of Mass, facing straight. The book is always straight on the epistle side and always at an angle on the gospel side. After the master of ceremonies returns the thurible to the thurifer, he will indicate the introit to the celebrant with his right hand palm upwards, simply pointing out to the introit. He'll stand by this side of the altar while the priest reads the introit. The servers make the signs of the cross with the celebrant, as at low mass. They make the bows with the celebrant, as at low mass. After the introit or the missa cantata, the celebrant normally returns to the center to say the Kyrie. However, some say the Kyrie in the book. This master of ceremonies will respond to the Kyrie. After the Kyrie, have the oration. That's the master of ceremonies' position in the book to point out prayers to the celebrant before you read them. During the master of ceremonies, during the sung mass, cannot be said to have a particular place, because the master of ceremonies is here to ensure that the ceremony runs smoothly. So, if he has a place, that place is beside the book when the priest is reading, or at the epistle side in front of the altar, facing straight. Normally, the thurifer should keep the thurible with him and the book, swinging it gently, even after the incensing of the altar, returning it to the sacristy after the insensation of the Blessed Sacrament at the elevation. And then he wouldn't pick it up again until the end of Mass. Okay? After he brings the torchbearers back in when they're depositing the torches in his back. The third would simply be at his place over in the side. Now, if I could just have the third one again. When the third are standing, just holding the third one. When the third are standing, just holding the third one, he should open it slightly to give it proper ventilation while he's swinging it gently in front of him, back and forth. And also to avoid thurible sticking. Because when it's hot, then you can have some creosote build up inside the thurible, and it'll stick closed. In the event that the thurible should stick closed anyway, because it isn't properly cleaned or whatever the case may be, the thurible is trying to open it, the priest put on incense, and it won't open. Place the base between his feet on the floor and pull on it slightly. You should never try to tug on it while the base isn't being held, because then when it does pop open, it's very easy for the charcoals to fall out on the floor. So just puts the thurible between his feet, the base between his feet, just tugs on it slightly. Okay, so the third foot, normally the third foot place is at the epistle side of the sanctuary, but once again, because the sanctuary is so constricted, we'll have to stand at the gospel side. After the celebrant reads the epistle and the gradual and the allegory, I don't suppose he ever sits. Or the gradual and the allegory. Well, before we read the epistle, we'll have the celebrant will read the oration. He'll sing the glory. Okay? And the celebrant goes to the center for the glory. Master of ceremonies goes to his place at the epistle side. Celebrant intones the Gloria. He'll need a sedilla to sit on. The celebrant intones the Gloria. He'll sing the Gloria here. The servers bow when the celebrant bows, reciting the Glorias of all Mass. At the end of the Gloria, they'll genuflect, and the MC will genuflect with him. The MC will accompany him to the sedilla. You know, for a mystic encounter, do you normally have the MC facing that? Okay, so the MC will come to the sedilla with Father. If Father has a beretta, then the MC will be handing Father his beretta with the usual kisses. And then now do they put the chasuble over the back of the chair? So it's kind of awkward.
Just pull it out.
So just celebrant, so the MC stands facing out toward the faithful. After the celebrant sits down, the master of ceremonies gives a clap as a signal for the other servers, except the thurifer, to sit down. Okay, the thurifer remains standing whenever he's holding the thurifer. Standing or kneeling, he never sits with the thurifer. At the end of during the Gloria, when the choir comes to a point at which a verse during the Gloria at which the celebrant is supposed to bow, if he's wearing a beretta, the master of ceremonies will bow to the celebrant first as a sign to take off his beretta, then he turns and bows to the cross on the altar. If he's not wearing a beretta, the master of ceremonies does not bow to the priest first. He simply turns and bows to the cross on the altar. The rest of the service bows while they bow their heads. Now, when you're sitting, when you're standing, okay, and it comes to a point where you're supposed to bow, the server would turn toward the cross and bow toward the cross, the altar cross, as the MC does, since he's standing. When sitting, one doesn't turn and bow to the cross. One simply bows straight ahead. Whenever sitting or kneeling, you don't turn at an angle or shift in order to bow at an angle. Simply bow straight ahead. At the end of the Gloria, from Sancto Spiritu, the Master of Ceremonies bows to the celebrant as a signal to stand and return to the altar. He's wearing the beretta. He'll first of all give the beretta to the Master of Ceremonies, so we'll leave it on the sedilla. The Master of Ceremonies accompanies the celebrant to the altar. They genuflect. The Master of Ceremonies holds the owl, and then returns to the book. Okay. The celebrant will come to the book for the oration. After the oration, he'll either read or sing the epistle, and then the gradual and the alleluia. Now, if the choir is going to take a long time in singing the gradual and the alleluia or the tract, the celebrant will sit at this point. He won't go to the center and genuflect first. He'll simply turn and come to the sedilla a short way. If this is the case that the celebrant is sitting during the gradual, then the Master of Ceremonies would bow to the celebrant as an indication to return to the altar at the beginning of the Alleluia or at the beginning of the tract during Lent. When the celebrant, during the chanting of the Alleluia, when the celebrant is at the center of the altar, the thurifer and the MC will approach to have incense imposed for the gospel procession. Stand at the celebrant's right during the first sentence of the gospel if our Lord's name is mentioned in the gospel, at which point he will bow and then return to his place to the left of the thurifer. At the end of the gospel, the master of ceremonies will make the response, and as the celebrant is raising the book to kiss the book, the acolytes will proceed around to their places at the front of the altar and wait there for the master of ceremonies and thurifer. As soon as the acolytes are out of the way, the master of ceremonies and the thurifer come to the side of the altar. And the celebrants kiss the book. He will turn to them to the incense. But bowing before and after, the master of ceremonies will incense the celebrant once again with 3 double swings. We return the thurible to the thurifer, and then they'll both walk around to the front of the altar. Now it's important to note that during the singing of the gospel, the master of ceremonies does not swing the thurible, he simply holds it straight. And then at this point, if there's to be a sermon, the servers will wait for the celebrant. If there's no sermon, they simply genuflect and then go to their places. Now for the altar, I need to make the If there's a sermon, the thurifer will take the thurible and the boat into the sacristy and leave it there, and come out here and sit beside the master of ceremonies during the sermon. If there's not a sermon, the thurifer will simply come and stand at his place at the gospel side. The master of ceremonies, after he genuflects, will go to the epistle side of the altar. In the event that there is a sermon, at the end of the sermon, the master of ceremonies will come around behind Father to the epistle side, genuflect with him, hold his albus he ascends to the altar, and then return to his place in front of the altar at the epistle side. If there's a credo, it's done as at the Gloria, with one possible exception. If the celebrant does not finish the credo before the choir reaches the point at which a genuflection must be made, then the celebrant will kneel at the edge of the predella during the singing of the Homo Factus Est. The master of ceremonies and all the other servers will likewise kneel. If the celebrant finishes the credo and has time to seat himself at the cedilla before that point in the chant is reached, he'll simply genuflect as he did at the Gloria and proceed to the cedilla with the master of ceremonies. He'll sit down. At a signal, all the servers stand. signal from the master of ceremonies that the servers accept the first will and yeah. We'll sit. We'll sit. Now, when the verse is reached, at which the genuflection must be made, the master of ceremonies will turn toward the cross, kneel down, and bow toward the cross. The other servers remain seated and simply bow. They don't stand up and kneel down. They remain seated and bow. Now, if the celebrant was kneeling at the altar for the verse of the credo, then after that verse, he would rise with the master of ceremonies. They would genuflect, come to the Sevilla, and at that point, the master of ceremonies would go to the credence table and put on the gloves, take the chalice to the altar, and leave it there. If they come to the Sevilla before the genuflection, then the master of ceremonies waits at the Sevilla until after the genuflection. And then he goes to the credence table, puts on the gloves, he'll take the chalice. Now the way to approach with the chalice is the master of ceremonies picks up the chalice at the credence table, he'll come around in front of Father, and he'll bow to Father. Normally, he wouldn't have to bow to Father unless he were passing in front of him. Okay? The master of ceremonies doesn't go out of his way to bow to Father, but since here he'd be crossing in front of Father anyway, he'll come before Father. He'll come before Father and bow to Father, and then turn, genuflect in front, go up to the altar, he can place the chalice on the altar, and it's important to note that when the master of ceremonies is carrying the chalice, he must carry it in the same manner that the priest carries it when he walks into the low mass. Okay? He shouldn't have to have it backwards with the cross facing towards himself. He should be carrying it the same as the priest does at low mass. And that is holding the stem of the chalice with the left hand, the right hand on top of the verse to support it. Okay? It's not permitted to carry the chalice in one hand because there's a danger of knocking the hat out. If there's a ciborium also, then acolyte 1 will take the ciborium, master of ceremonies, the chalice. The two of them walk in front of Father and bow. The two would genuflect in front of the altar. They go up to the altar. The acolyte 1 would put the ciborium down to the epistle side of the tabernacle. He would then genuflect on his own and go directly back to his place. The master of ceremonies, after he puts the chalice on the altar, he then goes to the gospel side and moves the book in toward the chalice if the celebrant has not already done this himself. He then genuflects on the top step of the altar and returns to the still by the short way, just cutting straight across the sanctuary. Acolyte 1 would bow to the priest if he's bringing the ciborium over. Yes, you could have gloves, or he could grab it by the ciborium veil. Because normally, for the ciborium, if the ciborium is empty, it shouldn't have a veil on it at all. And if it has posts on in it that are unconsecrated, the veil is placed on the ciborium, but turned back halfway. And then when the ciborium has the hosts in it, then the veil is put on in the normal manner. At the end of the credo, the master of ceremonies bows to the celebrant to rise, at which point all the servers rise. Return to the altar. And the next part of the Mass will be the offertory. The celebrant will sing Domus Vobiscum Spiritu Tuo Oremus. At the Oremus, the master of ceremonies will just walk away in front of the altar. When the celebrant unveils the chalice, he'll give the chalice to the master of ceremonies. Meanwhile, the acolytes take the cruets as the servers do at low Mass. Master of ceremonies will fold the chalice veil in 3 and place it on the altar toward the gradine. The shelf of the altar is called the gradine. This is called the mensa. The master of ceremonies places the veil on the mensa toward the gradine, and then he simply turns and walks back into his place in front of the altar step. The acolytes for the Missa Cantata approach it just as the acolytes would for a low Mass. Okay, so they bow to the priest, and then they kiss the cruets, and then when they receive the cruets back, they kiss the cruets once again and bow to the priest, and then return the cruets to the credence table. As soon as the acolytes have returned to the credence table, the thurifer approaches, and then incense is imposed once again. genuflect, and he'll stand on the gospel side, facing across toward the epistle side. Act like one's close to the priest. If you think that'll be too easy. Then the altar will be incensed as it was the first incensation, but before the celebrant incenses the cross. Before the celebrant incenses the cross, he'll incense what's called the oblata, which is the host and the wine for the consecration. Now, after the celebrant incenses the crucifix and the relics, he'll start moving toward the epistle side, and as the celebrant moves toward the epistle side, acolyte 1 will come up and take the book without bowing, and then he'll step down off the predella. After the celebrant incenses the epistle side of the altar, he'll come back again, genuflecting in the center. He'll incense the gospel side. After he incenses the gospel, then he returns to the epistle side, and at this point, acolyte 1 places the book on the altar again. And then acolyte 1 will return to his place by the credence table. And the acolyte will just have to wait over here by the sedula until after the celebrant has been incensed. The celebrant returns the thurible to the MC. The MC incenses the celebrant as he did before, at the first incensation. And then he'll return the thurible to the thurible. The thurible and the MC both walk to the front of the altar. Okay, the acolytes approach. Acolyte 1 taking the finger towel from acolyte 2 as he crosses behind him. The acolytes perform the Lovato as a low mass, and then we return the Lovato edition of Pruitt to the credence table as that low mass. Now, when the master of ceremonies and the thurifer come to the front of the altar, they genuflect. The master of ceremonies ascends the altar obliquely and stands by the book. He is then incensed by the thurifer with one double swing. And whenever incensing, there's a bow before and after. The thurifer can then genuflect. You can stand in this, you don't have to genuflect. The thurifer can just stand in the center, turn toward the acolytes, and bowing before and after, he incenses each acolyte with a double swing.
If
they're still involved with the law, we can just wait for them. Okay, incenses them with each one with a double swing, beginning with acolyte 1 and then acolyte 2. Then you turn to the torchbearer. Now, torchbearers are incensed collectively, whether there's one torchbearer here, 2 torchbearers, or 3 torchbearers here. They're always incensed collectively. Now, when incensing collectively, this means that they're incensed with 3 single swings. One to the center, one to the left, and one to the right. Bowing before, he brings the thurible to the level of his chest, to the center, to the left, and to the right. Bowing before and after. Now, a double swing is different in that he brings the thurible to the level of his face. The double swing. And in between each set of swings, like a double swing, the thurible is then lowered. In between incensing the servers, the thurifer does not carry the thurible with the chin extended. The thurifer will hold the thurible in 2 hands as long as he's going to incense someone else. Left hand flat on the chest, right hand down by his waist. So the thurifer then from the center, he can bow to the torchbearer and incense the torchbearer, center, left, and right. Even though there's only one, so always incense the left. And he'll genuflect in the center. Genuflect in the center. And incense the torchbearer and the crossbearer on the gospel side. Stay right there. It's not necessary. That was more convenient. It's more convenient for him to walk over there, that's fine. And then he can genuflect in the center once again. Go down to the level of the communion rail and incense the faithful collectively. To the center, to the left, and to the right.
Now this time the faith is still open.
After the thurifer incenses the faithful, he turns toward the altar and stays right down there. The torchbearers will come down, walk down the steps, and stand on either side of the thurifer. You don't have to. Walk down the steps and stand on either side of the thurifer. At a signal from the thurifer, the torchbearers will genuflect. Okay. Turn around and process to the back where they'll get their torches. Now the torchbearers, when they turn, come right here, turn on this one. After they genuflect, when they turn around, they turn toward each other, like that. Okay? They turn toward each other, and they walk side by side. They walk side by side. They'll process out to the back, where they'll get the torches, and then as soon as the choir begins singing the Sanctus, the thurifer will lead them back into the chapel. Back around. Meanwhile, the master of ceremonies.
There's four of them? What if there's four torchbearers?
If there's four torchbearers, if there's more than two, then they would all line up in a straight line with the thurifer, the genuflect, and then the first two simply turn around and face out until the thurifer gets a processional distance from them. They begin walking. The other two remain facing each other. When the first two leave, they step into the center and face down the church. When the torchbearers preceding them get a processional distance, then they begin walking as well. They walk down the side because of the camera. Normally they walk down the center. Meanwhile, this way, the master of ceremonies is standing beside the book. The celebrant will say the prayers. The master of ceremonies will respond to the Sushupya. After he makes that response, they'll indicate the offertory and, not the offertory, I'm sorry, the secret to the celebrant. The celebrant will read the secret. After he reads the secret, the master of ceremonies will turn the page to the preface. The master of ceremonies will have to make sure that the ribbon is kept out of the way so the priest can read the preface. Usually more convenient to have the ribbon up to the top here where the master of ceremonies can reach it conveniently. At the end of the preface, after the celebrant has finished the Sanctus, the master of ceremonies will turn the page to the canon. And will stand by the book at the canon. Now, when the choir begins singing the Sanctus, the thurifer will lead the torchbearers into the sanctuary. The torchbearers walk side by side behind the thurifer. The acolyte one will ring the bells as we normally would during the low mass. Now, the torchbearers walk side by side. Come up to either side of the thurifer. Okay? When the torchbearers come into the sanctuary, they come to either side of the thurifer. Now, if there's more than two torchbearers, then the first two that come in will leave room for the other two between him and the thurifer. Okay? But since there's just two of them here, they'll come and they'll stand right beside the thurifer. The first thing the torchbearer does is put his torch on the ground. Okay? And then when he's put his torch on the ground, at a signal from the thurifer, they'll genuflect. Torchbearers will walk up the steps. Okay, now stand on the second step here. That's right. Put down the torch. That's right. And then the thurifer will then give them a double clap, and they'll kneel down on the carpet. Okay, the thurifer will then close the gate. After he closes the gate, he'll go to his place and pick up the bow. And we can move the thurifer will genuflect, go to his place, and stand there until the hankijitur. At the hankijitur, come to the center, genuflect, come over to acolyte 2, and acolyte 2 will put 3 scoops of incense into the thurifer, and then, meanwhile, at the book, the master of ceremonies will be watching the priest, and at the Predie, it's not required that they have to have 3 scoops, just how many. Because otherwise, they can't distinguish the sharp. Okay. Now, what do you normally have them do with the bow? Okay, then the thurifer will take it with him. interpreted by the Master of Ceremonies, when the celebrant reaches the prayer, qui prediate. Now, the Master of Ceremonies often cannot hear the priest, but he'll know when the priest reaches his prayer because he will wipe his fingers on the corporal. Pick up the corporal, wipe his fingers on the corporal. And at this point, the Master of Ceremonies is going to double clap. All the servers will kneel. The Master of Ceremonies will kneel in his spot to the left of the celebrant. Consecration is done as normal. Acolyte 1 rings the bells as at low mass. The celebrant will genuflect, and you don't need to sit. Okay. The Master of Ceremonies will elevate the chasuble as the server would at low mass. 1 hand or 2. Whichever's convenient. Maybe 1 hand or 2. Whichever's convenient. Now, third, in order to incense the Blessed Sacrament at the elevation, the celebrant will genuflect, and then as he begins elevating the host, the third incenses with 3 double swings. Okay, it should be timed so that it's the first double swing while the celebrant's elevating the host, the second double swing as the celebrant reaches the top of the elevation, and the third double swing as he's bringing it down. Now, if you've got a celebrant who's holding the host up in the air for a long time, then you don't delay the third double swing. It should be a fluid motion. It should be continuous. And it's the same procedure for the consecration of the precious blood. After the consecration of the precious blood, the Master of Ceremonies will clap. All the servers except the torchbearers will rise. The thurible will go into the sacristy and leave the thurible and the vote in there. Master of Ceremonies will turn the pages at the canon for the priest. When the book is on the side, the Master of Ceremonies turns the pages with the left hand and he'll indicate prayers if necessary with the right hand. It's better if the Master of Ceremonies isn't indicating prayers to the celebrant during the canon because this usually only distracts the priest. During the canon, when the celebrant gets to the memento for the living and the dead, at each time, the memento for the living comes before the consecration, the memento for the dead comes after the consecration. When he gets to that prayer, the Master of Ceremonies will know when he arrives to that prayer because he separates his hands and then bows his head and remains bowed for a few moments. The Master of Ceremonies will step back to the edge of the predella. And then after the celebrant continues, he'll step back up toward the book. At the Agnus Dei, the servers will strike their breasts as at low mass. And then the acolytes will come to the front of the altar, genuflect, and hold the communion cloth over the communion rail as at low mass. Right after the consecration, all servers except the torchbearers. Now, at the Domine non Sundingus, acolyte 1 will ring the bells at low mass. When the celebrant receives communion, the servers are standing. When the celebrant picks up the host to receive the host, the Master of Ceremonies steps back to the edge of the predella as he did for the memento. When the celebrant consumes the host, the servers who are standing, the servers bow their heads, bow the head and shoulders, and then as soon as the celebrant has consumed the host and he stands erect again, the servers stand erect. The Master of Ceremonies claps, the torchbearers will rise. Now, we have a complication. How do you usually do it between the third or your acolyte 1 will have to get the cap. So as soon as the Master of Ceremonies claps, after the celebrant consumes the host, the servers go to their places to receive communion. At a signal from the Master of Ceremonies, the first thing the torchbearers do, of course, is put their torches down. signal from the master of ceremonies, all the servers genuflect, including the torchbearers on the side. Just the blessed side. They genuflect. And then a signal from the master of ceremonies, they kneel. They kneel on the floor. The master of ceremonies will say the confiteor as at low mass. Just the master of ceremonies. No, he's the only one with bentor. And then he'll kneel erect again after the instructed as at low mass. The servers make the sign of the cross and the celebrant blesses them. And then, now do they receive communion? Okay. When the celebrant then turns toward the altar to take the host from the subordinate, signal from the master of ceremonies, the servers will rise, and then a double clap, they'll kneel on the edge of the predella. Celebrant will turn around for the Ecce stay, and at the Dominus and Dignus, then as a low mass, the servers strike the breast. And then the celebrant will distribute communion to the servers. Okay. Acolyte one will hold the paten for the torchbearer. Then each acolyte, each server holds the paten for himself. If the server is not going to receive communion, he indicates this to Father by placing 2 fingers over his mouth and passes the paten on to the next. Now, what do we do with the teeth? Okay, so the MC will stand like that. Father will distribute communion to the other servers. Master of ceremonies will accompany the celebrant to the communion meal. Now, you'll have to have somebody give a signal for the bench to rise. Okay, the clerk will give a signal for the servers to rise. Okay, now where do you got the torchbearer stand? You have a sign for the extremities? Good, that's good. Okay, so the torchbearers will go to the extremities of the communion meals. The other servers will genuflect and return to their places where they kneel. After the celebrant is finished distributing communion, he'll take the paten from the master of ceremonies. The master of ceremonies will cross behind the celebrant to his right, come to the altar. The master of ceremonies will genuflect with the celebrant, and then go to his place at the epistle side where he'll kneel. When the tabernacle door closes, at a signal from the master of ceremonies, all the servants will rise. The acolytes immediately take the cruets. The third group, I'll read it the third verse. Okay. So when Father comes back to the altar to distribute communion, you'll have the torchbearers come back up here then. Okay? Come back up to your place. That's right. And then kneel on the carpet. When the tabernacle door closes and all the other servers stand up, the torchbearers will also stand up, and they'll remain on the second step there. Right there, that's right. On the second step. The third crew will go down and open the gate. Because we don't have one sign there. That is when they put together. And they go down and remove the communion.
Yeah, no, it takes one of each in the middle.
They'll genuflect together. The master of ceremonies will return to his place. The master of ceremonies, after he genuflects, he comes over to the gospel side. Okay? The third crew opens the gate. And the acolytes handle their cruets as at low mass. The torchbearers go down to the floor with the third crew. Torchbearers turn around and walk down the steps facing forward. Put the torches down. And then the signal from the third crew, they genuflect and follow the third crew out. They'll run, they'll deposit their torches in the back, and the third crew will lead them in immediately. Okay. The acolytes take care of the cruets as a low mass. After they're finished with the cruets, they transfer the veil and the missal. Acolyte 2 taking the missal, acolyte 1 taking the veil. So therefore they come to the front of the altar. Yes, you'll be standing. You have to remove the chalice.
Yeah, we should do the chalice of the other Father of the highest and most holy.
See, that's why we're keeping it next to the door and right behind you. See it. Now, this is Dave Love's story.
Yes, that was
If the thurifer should arrive while the acolytes are going through the motions of transferring the veil and the missal, it's better if he waits on the floor until they're finished. Come to the center and genuflect together. And then return to your place by the priest. Okay, when the thurifer comes in, they'll genuflect with the torch bearers. Torch bearers will return to their places. The thurifer goes into the sacristy to take the thurifer. Normally put a scoop of incense on the charcoal before he brings the thurifer back out. Okay, now as soon as the acolytes have left from transferring the veil and missal, the master of ceremonies will step up to the pedella and stand beside Father. And he may assist Father by handing him, holding the verse up before him and handing him the chalice veil. When Father is finished with that, the master of ceremonies will take his gloves and remove the chalice as soon as Father goes to the book. He'll take the chalice and walk down in front of the altar and genuflect on the floor, put the chalice on the credence table, and then assume his position beside the missal. Now, if there's, in the event that there's a suborner, what will happen is the acolytes will transfer the veil and the missal. They put the missal here, the veil there, and then they remain up here until Father is finished with the suborner and places it to one side. Then the acolyte will take the suborner veil, grab the suborner with it, and then the two acolytes will leave, genuflect, and go back to the credence table as normal. Now, in the event that the priest puts the suborner veil on one side and the suborner on the other side, the one acolyte will take the suborner veil and hand it to the other acolyte behind Father. Then the master of ceremony will be back beside the book for the communion antiphon. Often, by the time he reaches the book, the celebrant will have already said the communion antiphon. He'll be here for the post-communion prayer. After the celebrant finishes the post-communion prayer, he goes to the center. The master of ceremony steps up onto the predella and closes the missal. When the missal is closed, it's closed with the leaves facing toward the tabernacle. Now, do you have an intonation for the missal?
Yeah.
You do?
No, not dismissed.
Okay. And the master of ceremonies will stand facing toward the altar at the book during the singing of the Ite Messias. When the choir begins singing the Debratis, he'll simply turn by his right and go to his place. He'll go to his place in front of the altar on the epistle side. He'll be standing there. The celebrant will give the last blessing, after which they'll go to the gospel side to say the gospel. Master of ceremonies turn to the angle. The servers make the triple sign of the cross. After they make the triple sign of the cross, the procession is formed. So the acolytes will pick up their candles, the crossbearer will take the cross, and the thurifer is waiting for the thurifer. The thurifer can go down and stand outside the sanctuary near the carpet. The acolytes will come across and walk down and stand inside the sanctuary by the communion. The crossbearer will join the acolytes. And the torch bearers, just walk straight down. The torch bearers can come and stand in a straight line on top. Okay? If there's more than two torch bearers, if there's more than two torch bearers, then they would form a straight line across, and all four will stand straight.